This is Parker Hesse.
This is Sam Branks.
You have the pleasure of listening to Hawkeyes and Tallboys. Cheers, motherfuckers.
Welcome to the Hawkeyes and Tallboys podcast, featuring your hosts, Bo Freeborn.
You know, guys, even though we get 2 conference losses, we're still going to end up 9-3. We're going to win the West, for sure.
Dylan Pond.
Here's the thing, fellas. I'm going with it. 12 and fucking 0, baby. We're going to do it. Let's fucking go. Woo!
And Rob Wall.
I mean, that would be shocking. But we can do it. I mean, I think we can.
So crack a tall boy and go Hawks.
Whoa, okay. Welcome in to another episode of Hawkeyes and Tallboys. I'm Rob.
I'm Bo.
I'm Dylan.
And today we have a special guest with us. It's Andy from Illinois. He is a lifelong Illinois fan. You can follow him on Twitter at AndyGetBuckets. So welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Thank you, boys. Thank you for having me. Beautiful intro. I'm excited to get it going.
Perfect.
Go.
Us as well. And we're going to crack a beer. And I heard you crack yours. So it's, this podcast is actually unofficially sponsored by Busch Light and also Miller Lite, which
Okay,
you would think
perfect.
that they would be competitors, but they just love us both the same. So unofficially, we are sponsored by them. So cheers.
Cheers, boys.
Oh, and I see Andy sipping on an ice cold Miller Lite. Good man.
Yeah, I grabbed the tall boy for you guys too. Just
Appreciate
as had to represent. So
Perfect.
Appreciate that, my man.
And so, welcome to the show. Obviously, we found you on Twitter. Dylan runs our Twitter account. And so, happy to have you and to get your thoughts on the game. So how long have you, obviously you said your whole life you've been an Illinois fan.
yeah, so I got hooked right around the, what was it, 2005 when the basketball team went to the Final Four. I was, 10, 11 years old. So that's like the peak. I feel like, for all of us, for when you kind of fall in love and find your teams. So, obviously got hooked right away. And, 2 years later, fast forward, the football team goes to the Rose Bowl. This is awesome. This is smooth sailing. Fast forward, 15 years and here we are. And it's been a struggle, but, they've had my heart ever since a child. So I got to stay loyal to your teams, so that brings me to this spot here.
Andy, as a lifelong Raiders fan, I get it.
Well,
Yep.
I got the not the Raiders. I'm sorry. I got the Illini. I got the Cubs. I got the Bulls. So, basically all Chicago teams. So most of my teams it's been tough, but it makes it that much sweeter when, you have those little victories. So.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I can sympathize with you there. I love all Chicago sports except for the Illini, if you want to consider them Chicago. So I'm a Cubs, Bulls, and Blackhawks, and all that. So thank you.
Really
Happy to have you. Sorry, Dil, what?
I said that's like really, really Northwest Chicago, isn't it? Or is it straight west? I guess I'm directionally challenged when it comes to Champaign.
Oh, it's downstate.
Yeah. So technically Northwestern likes to claim themselves as Chicago's Big Ten team, but whatever team is good, that's the team that's going to kind of take over the city. You saw it with Loyola when they made the Final Four. You kind of see it like every fall with, Pat Fitzgerald and the Wildcats. So really whoever's good that's the team that's going to take over the city. So.
I got you. Okay. Fair enough.
Well, before we get too much into talking about this Illinois football team that we're going to be matched up with this Saturday, we need to take a step back and hop in the time machine to 1 week ago, where the Hawkeyes took on the Minnesota Golden Gophers at home at Kinnick Stadium. The Hawkeyes actually won this game 27-22. It was a little bit closer than we thought it was going to be. And a little bit more high scoring, but basically the I'm just going to give us a little rundown of this game. Our starting quarterback ended up being Alex Padilla, his first career start. He was 11 for 24 for 206 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran for 1. Tyler Goodson carried the ball 18 times for 59 yards. He only averaged 3.3 a carry. We didn't really run the ball as well as we normally. I mean, we would like to think that we do, but some of our young receivers kind of stood out. Keegan Johnson had an unbelievable touchdown. And then we also had Charlie Jones, who had a really long touchdown reception, courtesy of Alex Padilla. So defense played all right. We kind of let them consistently get points, which is something that that we didn't think that would be something that we would have to deal with, but who knows. They're still kind of working out some things, it seems like, on our defense, but we did hold our opponent to under 25 points. Not like we have the streak alive anymore that we used to, but it was good to see that we came away with a win, basically. Don't want to spend a lot of time. I sort of nutshelled that game. Bo, I'd love to get your thoughts here before we move on here.
So I think our Minnesota correspondents or guests last week hit on the head that Minnesota is a super conservative team. I mean, they had multiple opportunities, to go on 4th down or take a shot for the end zone instead of kick field goal, and they stayed really conservative. Also, I'll mention this: Tanner Morgan fucking sucks. Like, that dude had so many opportunities to make big plays, and he double clutched. I mean, he was on everybody's draft radar after a successful season 2 seasons ago with 2 really talented receivers on that roster. So I'll just make that. But like Dylan always says, the defense didn't break. There's a ton of different opportunities where Minnesota could run all over us here, and obviously we held them under 25 points at 22. But as you alluded to, Padilla is the answer. He jolted that offense. They made enough plays just to get the job done. Love what I saw there from the offense. Dill, you have anything to add to that?
Oh, absolutely. The offense looked great, at least comparatively so. I think, look at Keegan Johnson, the resilience he has shown as a true freshman, dropping 2 straight balls and then coming back and, running for a 25-yard, I think it was, touchdown off that spot pass where he got hit 3 times. Like, the kid's, a 24-year-old in an 18-year-old's body, and love to see it. Just the future playmaking ability from him is just awesome to see, along with Arlen Bruce as well. A little disappointed, and after the fact, seeing Tyrone Tracy take to Twitter. And what did he say? What's the point of having a Swiss Army knife if you're not going to utilize them? And I couldn't love how Brian and Kirk addressed that in the media after that. It's, hey, this is a kid. That's how kids express themselves, and that's a kid that wants to help the team. So, yeah, he's frustrated, and we talked about it a little bit last week too. I guess I don't know if I would want a receiver on my team that felt like he got the ball enough. Like, there's a fine line between being confident and kind of being a douche to the team. And don't get me wrong, I think Tyrone's skating it a little bit, but overall, I still think he's an important member of the team, and I don't think you're going to see him ending up in the transfer portal by any means. So just, again, overall offensive effort, phenomenal. I think that was our best offensive performance all season long.
Yeah.
Defensively, a little bit of a rougher spot, allowing that many rushing yards on the ground, but that offensive line, they're bigger. What did that guy say? Golden Gopher, I think, told us, average.
Yeah. They're an inch.
3 inches taller, right? 3 inches taller and 30 pounds heavier than the Vikings offensive line. So that's just stupid. And they're all graduating. So yeah, let those Coke machines graduate. And, Iowa got the most important stat of the day, the W.
That's true. Well, that's really all we have to say about that game, guys. We're going to move straight away on to this preview with Illinois. Thanks for hanging with us, Andy. At Andy Get Buckets on Twitter. So we're looking at this Saturday. It's a 1:00 kickoff game, which is an unusual time for a home game at Kinnick. And we're going to play. We're going to be playing. Obviously, I'm just looking at the weather here. 53 degrees, partly sunny. It's going to be a great day for college football. So why don't you kind of give us a little back? I can give us, I guess, a little bit of an intro to this Illinois team. So And to be honest, I'm looking for answers from you, Andy, because this is a team that's beaten Penn State, Minnesota, Nebraska. Some teams that have some decent records here, but then they lost to Purdue, Maryland, Wisconsin, Rutgers. So it's like I could see this as sort of a grab bag, or they're like a mystery team. I think is what I was telling Bo. I can't tell if they're good or not.
And that's, I mean, as an Illini fan, that's exactly the problem, because if this team can go into Kinnick and run the football, they're going to have a chance to win the ball game. But if they can't do that and they get into, penalty trouble on offense, or, they give up these long drives on defense, they're going to have no shot, because you have two quarterbacks. You have Arthur Sitkowski and you have Brandon Peters. Both guys, they can't throw the ball. They're vertically challenged. The team, they really just have one wide receiver. You got Isaiah Williams, who's a sophomore who came into the program as a quarterback, who is now their number one receiver. He's got 38 catches on the year, and the next closest person has 14. So, I was telling you guys kind of before we even started recording, it's going to come down to stopping their run game, which is made up of Chase Brown, who's been fantastic this year, and then a freshman and Josh McCray, and then Isaiah Williams. If you can stop those three guys, Iowa might rout this team. But if Illinois finds a way to kind of chip away, run the football, slow drives, slow the game up, and kind of hang in there, and if their defense can get a turnover or something like that, that's when you see this Illini team that you watch and you're like, wow, this team can kind of really hang with anyone. So like you said, it is like a mixed bag. This team can either be very good, or, they can go out there and, get the doors blown off them. So as an Illini guy, it's hard to put your finger on where exactly this team is at this point.
And for listeners out there, what does this sound like? It sounds like the exact similar game recap. Iowa, Minnesota. What do? They had an experienced line, a couple of really good players to watch. What they do? Try to milk the clock, run the ball, and take the time of possession game and end up winning the game. So sounds like it's going to be almost exactly like what we just saw this last weekend.
And that's been Illinois' recipe for success all season. You look at their 3 wins, they beat Minnesota, who you guys obviously just played. They beat Minnesota. They had more time of possession than Minnesota, only by, a minute or so, but they won that, which was huge for them by running the football. And then you look at the Penn State game, they had the ball for, I want to say 13 more minutes than Penn State. And then Nebraska week 1, they had the ball for 9 more minutes than Nebraska did. And if Illinois can do that, that means they're running the ball successfully, and it's tough to stop. But when they don't do that, that's when you see the problems of a team who's maybe not as talented.
So when you look at the quarterbacks right now, Art Skotowski and then obviously Brandon Peters, I think a lot of folks thought, Brandon Peters was going to be the guy. Got hurt earlier in the year, and now he's coming back. And he was a big time transfer. We thought, he may be a really good player there for Illinois. When you say that he can't throw the ball, I mean, is that for real? Like they really don't have much of a throwing offense, or is it just him and his inability to make the right decisions?
I mean, they have 2 quarterbacks right now, both transfers. One was Sikowski was at Rutgers to start his career. He's back. They're a classic Big Ten team. They don't want to throw the ball 50 times a game. So I've seen flashes from Brandon Peters in the past last year, especially, he played well. He was able to throw the ball. This offense does not throw the ball. They have there's a huge lack at the wideout position. They don't have guys that can make plays. Their running backs are not necessarily great out of the backfield catching passes. And then again, their tight ends you haven't got much from them. They've been okay in the red zone, but as far as stretching the field or, having someone to go to on a consistent basis, they don't have that guy. So you have 2 quarterbacks, Sitkowski, a 50% completion percentage, Brandon Peters, 55%. Both guys are under 1,000 yards on the season. So, it's very tough to watch this team sometimes, because if they can't run the football, it it reminds me of a high school team, and that might be a little harsh, but it does remind me of a high school team because now they have no chance at being able to move the football.
But you have one thing going for you, and that is Mr. Brett Belima, who, unfortunately, for those of you that don't know, was diagnosed with COVID this week. However, that man, when he was at Wisconsin, he always knew how to beat the Hawkeyes. And for those of you that don't know, and maybe you don't even know this, Andy, but Mr. Belima, he's got himself, or I'm totally botched his last name there, but he's got a tiger hawk tattooed on his ankle. So, you know, it's tough to say who he's going to be rooting for sitting at the couch at home, resting up from COVID.
And that's a, you know, I like that you bring that up because I was going to bring that up. And I think that's a bigger factor in this game than, you know, the common fan or most people would look at it and say, oh, okay, you know, he's still the coach. But you got to understand, you know, put yourself in Brett Bielema's shoes. You're going back to Iowa. You know, you're with your new team back in the Big Ten. You want to try and, you know, make an impact and show everyone, hey, you know what? I'm the coach of Illinois now. We're serious. We're about to turn this ship around. You know, this is another chance to do that. He's not there. He's not going to be able to be in contact with the team. It's so when you take a team like Illinois that really they need to kind of be kept in the ball game. They need, you know, that support, which I do think is huge when you're looking at this Illinois football team. Maybe not so much with the Hawkeyes or other teams that are, you know, a little bit better, but this team is already down Jake Hansen, who's their senior linebacker, their leader. He's already down with an ACL. So you take away Bielema, a guy who can, if things go wrong at half and you're down 7 or 10 points, the guy who can get in there and, you know, rally the troops and get them to play, you know, play hard. And he's not there. And you're at a tough, you know, away stadium like Kinnick. It's a big factor to me in the way I look at this game. I really do think that.
You know, on top of that too, think about the recruiting path too, because Iowa has a ton of, you know, 2 and 3 and maybe even 4 stars to come from Illinois. So when you talk about Bielema coming back to the Big Ten, you're talking about a guy who's trying to assert his dominance in the home state of Illinois to try and keep these guys home, as opposed to Kirk and staff trying to steal those guys away and bring them over here to Iowa. So I agree with you that on that front, and I also think it's huge for recruiting path too. I think he's going to be really missed this weekend.
Absolutely, on that recruiting front. I mean, it's already been a big deal where, you know, Bielema has made it a point to, you know, recruit the state better and not let some of those Chicago guys go to Notre Dame, go to Iowa, you know, go out of state. So we've already seen it. You know, I'm trying to think of that running back's name you guys just picked up a few months back, but it sounded like it was Iowa and Illinois to the very end. And Illinois, you know, he stuck with that, you know, they call it the family with 2 L's because Brett Bielema doesn't know how to spell, but no, totally.
Well, the thing about it is, you know, this team had Lovie Smith as their coach for, you know, the 5 years that he was here. And Lovie Smith is a Southern guy. He likes to go into Texas. He likes to go into Florida. He likes to get, you know, players from the South. He did not focus on the state of Illinois. He doesn't necessarily have any ties to the state of Illinois other than, you know, being the Bears coach for, you know, the time that he was here. So you're now having a coach come in who, you know, might have some ties to the Illinois area, but this is a athletic department. This is a, you know, your recruiters are now having to go into these high schools around the state of Illinois with zero relationship to any of the people that are in these kids' ears. So you have it's about relationships. And at the end of the day, it's about winning. If you go out there and win, you're going to be able to get the players that you want. You look at, you know, Alabama, obviously, I'm not saying Illinois will ever be at that level, but you look at Alabama and it's a machine. You get the players in there because they're winning. You don't necessarily have to recruit. The recruiting does it yourself. Ohio State kind of the same way. And even Iowa, you know, has a certain style of player that they can just consistently bring in and a year out and, you know, swap it with the next guy. So recruiting, if you want to fix it, you got to get those ties, which I think Bielema's done a pretty good job of so far, but you got to win. And that's always the most important thing.
So speaking of winning, go ahead, Bill.
No, I was just going to say, kind of back on that recruiting front a little bit. I think locking down, the city of Chicago itself is just so huge because you see so many skill players coming out of that town that, frankly, don't typically go to Illinois. I think Illinois is kind of the afterthought for a lot of those kids. So locking down the state for one thing, yeah, obviously a big state, but and then getting into Chicago a little bit and getting some of those skill players, and that's just massive for a program like Illinois. And it sounds like he's already doing it. So they're going to certainly be on the up and up for the next few years.
And a good thing about that is you look at the basketball program, and they've done a great job of going into the city and, forming those relationships and getting these players to come in. You guys, had mentioned Io earlier, what he's been able to do to come in and, go on to the next level. And I know this is, a completely different sport we're talking about, but just even, if you can go to a school that has, maybe a stud basketball player who says, excuse me, I'm going to go to Illinois. And, you can, these people, these athletes, they talk to each other. They're all friends, You might have a buddy on the basketball team who could be a 4 or 5-star recruit who might end up going to Illinois just because the basketball program has done such a good job at building those relationships that now the football team can step in there and, maybe have a spot at the table. And that's what's most important.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a huge list of ball players that have come out of Chicago as far as basketball, but I won't go into it because I just could name them for days. It's like Derrick Rose, Tim Hardaway, Juwan Howard, all the Anthony Davis, there's another one. But anyways, being able to utilize the talent in a large metropolitan area like that is going to do wonders. And it's surprising that Lovey wasn't able to do that being the Bears coach.
Well, and I don't want to, that was my biggest issue with Lovey was people would bring up that exact point. Well, he was a coach of the Bears and they went to the Super Bowl. You got to understand that a kid who's 17, 18 years old, he doesn't care about the 06 Bears that went to the Super Bowl and didn't even win the Super Bowl because he was 5, 6 years old. So it's, and I love Lovey. I'm a Lovey Smith fan. I will always respect Lovey Smith. With what he was able to do with the Bears. We did have a couple good years with him as a coach of the Illini, but that was one of the things where it was that thought process of, well, this guy has ties because he coached the Bears and they had some success. But you got to understand the age of these kids. In 2006, you look at a kid who's going to graduate high school, this year or in the previous years. And that kid doesn't remember the 06 Bears that did not win the Super Bowl. So it's that sort of thing too. You need somebody who, with some nuts that can walk in there and kind of take control of the area. And we just haven't seen it yet, but Bielema seems like he could possibly be that guy.
Speaking of walking in with nuts and taking control, I want to hear a little bit more about the Illini defense. Is Bielema turning that defense around? Are they legit?
I don't know if I'd call them legit yet. They're not as good as they were last year. But they're a team that when the offense is doing their thing, they really feed off of that. So, they play very hard. They're a physical defense. They're good at creating turnovers and making plays when they need to make plays. Like I said, if Illinois' offense stalls out and they're 3 and out, they're 3 and out, they're 3 and out, they're turnover, it's going to be a long day for the defense. They're not good enough to kind of walk into Kinnick and say, okay, you want to beat us, you're going to have to beat us. But like I said, if the offense is good, the offense is running the football, the defense can kind of go out there in a bend, don't break sort of thing, make a turnover here, get a sack here, then I think they can definitely keep the team in the game. They don't give up a lot of points, but like I said, when they're out there all the time, that's when you see them start to struggle and they do make mistakes. And just the lack of faith that I have in the offense, it makes it even more difficult for that defense. I remember, being in high school playing football, and I'm sure you guys, were the same way in whatever sport, but the offense we had was horrible. And it was like, okay, you go out there on defense, we were pretty good, but it's like, man, you just got no confidence in your offense. And I do think that that's a problem. So it's so, like I said, it's so hard to kind of even guess which team is going to come out and, show up on Saturday.
That's a great segue into my next question for you. And I want everyone to kind of chime in on this, but Andy, I'll let you start here. So as an Illini fan, as you know, Iowa started the season with Spencer Petras, got hurt against Wisconsin. Now we're seeing Alex Padilla. Petras is more of a pocket guy, doesn't like to move a tree in the backfield. Whereas Padilla can roll out, get the ball moving, can throw outside the pocket. So as an Illini fan, would you prefer to see more Petras this week if he is able to return, or are you more scared of Padilla and maybe seeing what he can do, although he only has one career start underneath his belt?
I would be more worried about the pocket passer. I would rather see the pocket passer, because this is, like I said, this is a team that kind of feeds off of creating turnovers and, limiting big plays by creating turnovers. Like I said, it's a very bend, don't break sort of thing. They might give up a 60-yard drive, but then force a fumble or, get an interception. So if you could get Petras in there, sitting there and, force him to have to make some throws, I am confident that the secondary, which has been, very good this year, they're +5 in the turnover ratio. And for a team that only has 4 wins, I mean, that's something that's impressive. So I would much rather like to see Iowa have to throw the ball as much as possible, because that's going to give Illinois the most opportunities to make a big play defensively.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. And usually, Andy, we'll do this in a different order, but I feel like it's a good time and it's really a good segue because we're kind of getting into it a little bit. But we do a segment called Dylan's Keys to Victory. So let's go ahead, and I know we're on some time constraints here, so let's start with you. So what are your keys for the Illini to come into Kinnick this Saturday and get the W?
I think the biggest key is that they have to run the football. Like I had mentioned, time possession is going to be the biggest factor. If they can hold on to the football and they can run and kind of chip away at the Iowa defense, they're going to find themselves in the ball game towards the end. And that's when, you only need one big play from your defense, force a turnover, and all of a sudden you might be in a position to win. They've only done it three times this year, I would say, where they've really been able to kind of control the game and, dominate the front sevens and run the football down teams' throats. And even then, those games have kind of gone down to the wire. So, I mean, I like Illinois to cover the 13. I think Iowa's going to win the game. Ultimately, I think they're just a better team. But if Illinois wants to win the game, that's how they do it. They run the football. They take as much time as they possibly can off the clock. And then they let their defense go out there, make a couple plays, and, really just kind of keep the game sloppy. And that's going to be their chance to steal a win at a very, very tough stadium on the road. So my confidence level is not high. But is it impossible? I don't think so.
One of the interesting things that you mentioned that I wanted to bring up is Chase Brown, the running back number 2 for the Fighting Illini. In the games that you guys have won, keep in mind Penn State is a 9 overtime game.
Yeah.
But he had 223 yards against Penn State in those 9 overtimes, but he had 257 yards against your win against CLT Charlotte. Yeah, okay. And then he had 147 yards on the ground against Minnesota. So in the games where you guys win, I mean, he is rushing for upwards of 5 yards a carry. He ran for 6.8 yards a carry against Penn State, 9.9 against Charlotte. So it's interesting to note.
Yeah, he's a dangerous player. He's only a sophomore, so he's a guy that he almost, and this is high praise, I don't want to say he is this guy, but he reminds me a lot of like Saquon Barkley, where he's very fast and he's quick and he can make guys missed, but he's also very strong. He's a stocky guy. He's able to stay low. I think he's only 5'10", 5'11" at the most. So he's tough, and when they give, like I said, when they give him the ball and they get some sort of push from their offensive line, it does make for a long day for the defense, because every time you hit this guy, it's going to take, a lot of effort. He's not a guy that just goes down easily. And then, they have Josh McCray, who's a freshman, and that he's almost like the complete opposite. The kid's a beast. He's a big time player. He's 6'1", like 230, 240 pounds. And, so when Chase Brown needs a quick breath, they bring this kid in. And again, he's a big physical runner with some speed, and he can make for a tough day for the defense. But it all starts with the offensive line. The offensive line doesn't show up, then it's for nothing. So.
Well, all right. Well, Dylan, you know what time that is. That means it's time for Dylan's keys to the game.
That's right. Here come Dylan's keys to victory. So just so you know, Andy, and for you first-time listeners out there, I like to hold myself accountable. So we're going to revisit the keys to victory versus Minnesota and see how I did. Offensively, I said we needed to keep the foot on the gas pedal. Brian and Kirk didn't listen to that. Having a first-time starter in, I think they got a comfortable lead, and they coasted. So I'll give myself a C- there, because they kept the foot on the gas pedal in the first half, just not in the second half. Defensively, I said they needed to keep everything in front. And for the most part, they did that. Andy was just talking about it. I think it's just an overall Big Ten style of play really anymore, but that bend but don't break. If a Big Ten team is going to kick field goals all day, yeah, that's fine. Okay, we'll come in and we'll score touchdowns. And that's what you saw, especially from the first part in that first half. So sorry about that. If you guys can hear that, we got a dog in the background here yelping about something. So something not important. But anyways, looking at that, so defensively, they kept everything in front and they did a hell of a job there. So then special teams from there, it was going to be a field position battle. And I think it definitely was. You look at the time of possession, and Minnesota just kicked Iowa's ass. And if you look at purely the stats from that game, you'd think, oh, Iowa got smoked. And they came out with the victory, and Kirk joked around in the post-game presser, and he was like, yeah, those 73-yard touchdowns really kill your time of possession. Almost like he was disappointed, like, the classic Kirk 65-year-old man chuckle. But nonetheless, obviously it worked out, right? So they got the win. Overall, I give myself a C+. I was average in my keys to victory from last week. So that being said, we're rolling into how we're going to beat the Illini here at home this week, folks. Offense. Brian Ferentz talked about it here in his pregame presser for this week. Playing to your identity. Brian fully admitted that in the start, or at the end of the Wisconsin game, he took a look in the mirror and said, our offense has no identity. And he was right. Brutal to say, but he was. So we need to play to our identity. I know you're wondering, Dylan, what's the Hawkeyes' identity? It's running the football. It's running to set up the pass. It's running to set up that play action pass specifically. That's when this Hawkeye offense is going to have the most success. So, think passing to the tight ends, passing to your playmakers, passing to Goodson out of the backfield, Keegan Johnson, Arlen Bruce in the slot. The weapons are there. We got to use them. And, Andy touched on it as well. I think in my brief, very, very brief film work of Illinois, you see a secondary that sits back in coverage, kind of similar to Iowa. I wouldn't call it a two-man under zone by any means, but they keep everything in front. So they make it tough on you. If you're going to throw, you got to throw short, over the middle, and make plays after the catch. So I'm looking for Keegan Johnson to really have a big game here. Defensively, we need to capitalize off turnovers. Saw it versus Minnesota. That's how Iowa wins ball games. I think the one outlier in Iowa's schedule that folks look at is, that 52 to whatever, 17, I think it was, game where we beat up on Maryland. Yeah, well, Iowa had 6 turnovers and they capitalized on every one. So that's how Iowa is going to blow teams out, by turning over the football, getting put in good positions, and making the plays from there. And I think, that defense playing phenomenal despite, giving up 200+ yards rushing last week. I don't think they were necessarily prepared for what was behind Mohamed Ibrahim. So I think Kirk and Phil Parker especially know what they got in that two-headed monster, that thunder and lightning running back duo that come with the Fighting Illini. So I looking for them to capitalize on what turnovers we can get. And then special teams, I probably say it every week, but just disciplined special teams. I think Tory Taylor's the man, and that's one thing we'll want to touch on with Illinois as well. Made me think of it, but Tory Taylor's the man, and then Caleb Shudak as well. It's going to be, I don't know about when necessarily just yet. We haven't checked the weather for the game, but it's going to be a cold mother scratcher. It's not going to be fun to kick the football. So that's going to be a big part of the game. And then the Aussie from down under, I know he punted quite a bit in December last year. In December. So we'll see how that goes. You know what I mean? So overall, again, quick recap: offense, play to your identity, run the ball, set up for the pass. Let's see a lot of play action. Defense, got to capitalize off turnovers, and special teams play disciplined special teams like they have all year long. And I think we're going to be a bunch of happy campers come 4:30, 5 o'clock, somewhere in there on Saturday afternoon.
For all you listening, it's going to actually be beautiful on Saturday. 53 degrees, a high, only about 10 mile an hour wind, so it should be beautiful.
I thought it was going to be like 30 degrees. Literally just looked at this like 2 days ago.
It's going to be warming up. So hopefully that'll help the kicking game.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up special teams because I completely blanked on it. Yeah, Illinois got two very good kickers and punters. Well, punter and kicker, Blake Hayes and then James McCord. Blake Hayes, he's going to do something on Saturday for you Iowa fans where you're going to be impressed by it. And that's a punter. So, that's not necessarily something you're going to be looking out for or even really paying attention to. But I bet you he does something on Saturday where you're like, damn, like, wow.
Oh, and Andy, I have no doubt because literally in Kirk Ferentz's press conference this week, that's like one of the first things he said when talking about Illinois. Like a bunch of Iowa fans scoffed at it and thought it was hilarious. It's like, the first thing he said, he was very complimentary of, the kicking and punting game that Illinois has. And Iowa fans are like, typical Kirk, old man. It's like, no, that's important. That's a very important part of Big Ten football. And, in special teams, you could talk a little bit more about it, but it sounds like you got a couple studs.
And it's big in, like you said, Big Ten football. When these games are, they kind of all seem to end up close. They all seem to end up being sloppy. It really kind of comes down to, which team can make field goals and which team can kind of, dominate the differential of the field. So yeah, Illinois got two great, a great punter who he doesn't really want to play in the NFL, which is weird. So that's something to look to, but no, they're impressive. Like I said, I think that the punter for sure, Blake Hayes, will do something that'll, you'll be like, okay, this kid's the real deal.
And with field position too, I've heard that their kickers only allowed 4 returns on kickoffs too, which is incredible. That's an incredible stat.
Wow.
Well, and that's why they, when you're, I guess, an offensively challenged team, those are the things that are important. You need to be able to do those things. And luckily for Illinois, they have, two guys that are great at what they do. And, it's not as important when you can score 50 points a game, but when, you're struggling to score 20 and struggling to score 28, it's very important. So,
I mean, as another Big Ten team that is offensively challenged, I think we can relate.
Hey, not anymore, baby. It's a Padilla party. Let's go.
So we know we don't have a whole lot of time left with the Andy. So we'd like to give you the chance. We'd love to get, if you have a hot take, about this upcoming game this Saturday. We'd love to, hear about that and then get your prediction as well. And so I know that you mentioned it. The spread's at 13 for minus 13 for Iowa. So yeah, be happy to hear what you have to say on that before you go.
Well, I guess my hot take would be I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. I guess the hot take, I'll give you two. The first one is that Blake Hayes, the punter for Illinois, will do something that will make you impressed. You will be like, wow, that was cool. And you don't usually get to say that when you're watching special teams in a college football game. So that can be one. Two, let's go with this. Let's go Illinois will have 2 passing touchdowns in the game. So that will be my hot take. They only have 10 on the season. But yeah, I think that, I mean, listen, this is, kind of what I've been saying. If you think that the coaches at Iowa, down in Iowa City are not thinking that, hey, all we got to do is stop this team from running the ball, then we're crazy. So obviously that's what's going to be the focus for the Hawkeye defense. You got Isaiah Williams, he's a burner. He's very fast. All it takes is one completion. And then they do like to mix in the tight ends when they get in the red zone. So that my hot take will be that they will throw 2 passing touchdowns. So here's the problem with that, because my prediction is going to be, I think Iowa wins 24 to probably like 16. So that means Iowa did a pretty good job on the ground and kind of limited the run game, because my hot take is that they have 2 passing touchdowns. So I think Illinois will cover the 13. That's a lot of points. But I think Iowa they're just the better team. They're at home. They need to win out if they want to have any chance for the Big Ten title. It's, a long shot, but if they win out and get some help, Wisconsin loses a game, they could be playing for a Big Ten title. So I just think there's too much on the line. And I don't think Iowa at home is going to slip up bad enough to lose to this Illinois team without their head coach.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for hopping on with us, Andy. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully we'll get you out of here in time to catch the other thing that you need to get going. So thank you so much. And it's great having you.
Thank you, boys. I had a lot of fun. And once we get Illinois versus Iowa basketball, I would love to come back on. So
yeah.
I love the show. Great job. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Boys. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you, man.
All right. So guys, that was awesome. Loved having Andy on the show. He really kind of informed us a little bit more about the things that we were interested in to know about this Illinois team, which on paper is, more or less sort of a mystery. And so excited to see, he predicted 24-16, which is interesting. And that kind of leads us into hot takes before we get into prediction, guys. So I don't know, Dylan, do you have a couple hot takes for us on this game?
I sure do, bud. I sure do. So last week, you guys remember I said Alex Padilla was going to throw 3 touchdowns. He didn't throw 3 touchdowns, but he threw 2 and he ran 1 in. I still think he could have thrown that 3rd one right then, but my man Kirk's a little conservative, so it is what it is. I'm going with it this week, though. 3 tutties from Alex Padilla 2 weeks in a row. I know Bo's going to say that's lukewarm, and then he's going to come out and then say, yeah, Tyler Goodson might rush for, 50 yards. So whatever. What are your guys' hot takes?
Yeah, I'll take this. And mine is somewhat centered around Tyler Goodson. I don't think he's going to be the leading rusher this week. I think Gavin Williams is going to be the leading rusher. I think Tyler is kind of running. Yeah, Tyler's running a little bit too scared for my liking. I think that I think he's protecting himself a little bit too much. And I think that Gavin is a north-south runner. And I think if we're going to weaken this Illinois defense, we've got to have somebody who's going to be able to pound the rock. And I think that Gavin has really proven that he can do it, and he is our number 2 guy. I think Gavin's going to have more rushing yards than Tyler Goodson this week.
Well, that's a really good point. And I think we've started to see that, especially later on in the year.
Yeah.
Where I wish we could have seen that a little bit earlier on, that true thunder and lightning. Like, it reminds me of, the 2015, 2016 seasons when you had LaShawn Daniels and Akram Wadley back to back. Like that's an awesome problem for an offensive coordinator to have. Like, which running back do I throw in this situation? So
And you know what? And with something like that too, it's a perfect situation where Gavin wears them down and then T Good comes in and just beats them with speed, right? So I hope that I'm wrong in the fact that, Gavin's going to get more yards, whereas I really do hope that T Good has a really great game and runs over 100 yards. But I just really feel like Gavin Williams is due for a big game, and I think that he's due to have more touches this week.
I'd agree with that.
Rob, do you have any hot takes?
Yep. I got a hot take, and I am calling on a member of the offense who doesn't get mentioned that often, but the things that he does when it comes to run blocking, pass blocking, things like that, not to mention the man's haircut, which is unbelievable, raveled only by our own Dylan Pond. I'm going with Monte Pottebaum, baby. He's getting a tutty this week. He's only had one touchdown on the year, and that came against that rout against Maryland. 51-14 was the final score of that one. I think that he gets in the end zone this week. I don't think this week's going to be close. I think that Illinois has the capability to play a good game, but I think that this Iowa team's found new life. With Padilla, I think that our offense is starting to click a little bit more. The things that we saw that were like sort of drive killers out of Spencer Petras, like, throwing the ball away on third down and letting us punt, you know what I mean? Rather than try to make a play, standing back there, taking sacks, things like that, missing throws. Like, I think they're calling different plays because they have a different play caller in Padilla. And I think the offense is starting to find their stride. And if that's the case, we could end up running the score up on Illinois. And I hope that's what we see. Actually, I wouldn't turn it off. I was going to say, I hope I am okay to turn it off at halftime because we're up by so much, but I probably wouldn't because you don't get I watched that whole Maryland game and I loved it, every second of it. I was like, let's get one more, let's get one more touchdown. So, that's what I think.
On that note, Rob, do you want to go ahead? We'll go straight into predictions. Rob, do you have a prediction for this game?
Absolutely. I got a prediction for this game, guys. And if you are somebody who likes to sport bet, obviously we're unofficially sports sponsored by DraftKings. And so and we mentioned this, I think Andy mentioned it earlier, the spread's at 13. And that's in favor of Iowa. So Iowa minus 13. The over under for this game is 38.5. And so, Andy's prediction at 24-16, if you do the math there, puts it at 40. So he thinks it could hit the over. And then obviously moneyline Iowa is minus 510 odds. If you picked the underdog in Illinois just to win in whatever fashion that they win, that would be a plus 375 moneyline bet. So interesting to know about the betting lines there, guys. For me, if I'm going to put money down on this one, I would predict this one to be a huge win for Iowa. I think that we're going to score more points than we did last week. And if you look at that score, it was 27-22. And so I think we win 33, which is a weird one. I think we win 33-10. So it's going to be, we hit the over, we hit the spread. If you look at Iowa, they earlier in the year when we had games against the likes of Maryland, Colorado State, Kent State, even you could throw that first Indiana game in there. ISU is kind of an outlier because that was a closer game than those, but we were, 5-1 or 6-1 or something like that. We started out against, I think we were 5-2 at one point against the spread. And since then, Iowa has been not good against the spread. And I think that also correlated, you could see that on the field, we just seem to be falling apart. I feel like we barely, obviously we barely beat Penn State, then we lost a couple, obviously, to Purdue and Wisconsin, where we looked miserable, during those games. So in my opinion, I think that we get it going. I think Illinois is another team that you can throw in the bag against, with, Colorado State, Maryland. I just don't think that they're not quite there to the caliber that we are. And so I hope that we show, that's what I think. And I just hope that they show that to me on the field this Saturday. But I mean, being a Hawkeye fan, and you guys know as well as me, that couldn't. I mean, we could see something completely different.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and that's so funny you say that, Rob, because I just think of senior days of Kinnick's past. You know, we've had some routes, we've had some clunkers, and we've had some go to the last minute. So, literally, anything can happen. And so, in this particular game, I see it going one of two ways. I see this either being, down to the last few minutes in the fourth quarter with Iowa pulling out a close win, or I see an Iowa rout. I don't at this moment see a way, and obviously it could be proved wrong, but don't see a way where Illinois ends up winning this game. I just think Iowa has too much to play for. And that being said, I got Iowa winning this one 34-20. I do think it's close early on first half. Then I think in the second half, we break this one out a little bit and see a little bit more of what Padilla is made of. And little pick to click, I think Sam Laporta has himself quite a day. So along with Alex Padilla's 3 TDs, I'm going to say he gets one, if not 2 of them. So Iowa wins big at Kinnick, baby, to end off a great fall back at Kinnick. I cannot state it enough. Oh, it's going to be a glorious day.
Love it. And I like your pick too, Dylan. And I liked how you said, senior day, Iowa City, it's going to be a beautiful weekend. One thing that, that Andy said earlier that I really want to come back to is that Brett Bielema will not be there to coach in person. So I really like your idea of this Illinois team, maybe scrambling a little bit. But one thing that wasn't mentioned today is that Illinois is coming off of a bye week. And so unlike Iowa, a lot of teams prepare for that game coming off the bye week and excel. So I know that a lot of people think this may be a blown out the door, but I'm going to take the spread on this one. Iowa wins 30-17. They're going to push that 13, but they're going to hit the over. So I like that. I like that pick there too. And I think this is a great segue into our mailbag here. And guys, I have 2 quick mailbag questions for you. Dill, I want to start off with you first. We just talked about senior day. Riley Moss is a senior. He's saying he may come back next year after not having a PCL here. And Tyler Linderbaum says he's not even going to think about it until after the season. Do either of these 2 guys come back after all the great seasons they've had? Obviously, Riley Moss senior now. Linderbaum is probably the best center in this draft class. Do either of these guys come back next year?
It's so tough to say there, Bo, because you look at it, especially at that defensive back position, like a guy like Desmond King, Jim Thorpe award winner as a junior. Everybody was pretty much convinced he was a first-round pick, shocked the world, and decided to come back for a year and dropped a few rounds because of it that following year in the draft where, he didn't have as good of a senior year because nobody was throwing the ball his way. So it's, tough to say. And truthfully, I couldn't fault these guys for choosing either way. I think, Tyler Linderbaum's one where it's very evident he just absolutely loves the University of Iowa. I know I've said it a million times. I'm still somewhat convinced he's one of Kirk Ferentz's long lost sons because he looks very similar to both James and Brian. So that being said, could have a half brother there in Tyler Linderbaum. And I know his mom discredited me on Twitter, so I'm sorry.
Lisa.
I'm sorry about that, Mama Lisa, but
Did she really?
No. Yeah, she discredited it. She told me she can confirm it's not true. So,
That's so funny.
Just yet. I don't know, but no.
Yes.
That being said, I really do think if either one of them is going to come back, I think it'd be Linderbaum. I think, and Riley Moss experiencing it this year, where tearing his PCL and not having a PCL on his knee, obviously, what an absolute badass, but. I think that's going to kind of click in his mind where it's like, yeah, okay, literally one injury and my potential NFL career is wiped away. So I think if you're him, you got to go. That being said, I don't know how important degrees are to him and whatnot. And because I do remember, I don't think he ever took advantage of a redshirt year, if I remember right, because I'm pretty sure he got thrown in as a true freshman. So if anybody's going to come back, it's going to be Linderbaum. I think Riley Moss is gone. And I'm going to go ahead and say, hot take, Linderbaum will be a Hawkeye next year. despite being a consensus first round pick.
Honestly, I'm gonna agree 100% with Dylan. And like, I didn't think you were gonna say that, Dill. I thought my answer was gonna be a hot take, but you're right. Riley Moss right now projected early round, so first, second round pick in the NFL draft. I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, that rookie contract is going to be so much more than what Desmond King got when he dropped a few rounds, just for playing an extra year. And I think that once you get spooked like that, with a big injury where you miss games and, especially in the knee, something like that. And we watched the tape. I mean, I remember watching that play where he was injured and I was confused because I was like, wait, what happened? Did he like trip on that? Did he like land wrong? It didn't look like he twisted it to me. It looks like he just kind of he actually made a great play. He almost picked the ball off, and he kind of rolled, and then that was it. Like that was like torn ligaments in his leg. He's done. And so so I think that you're right. I think that that's something he'll consider. And I mean, to be honest, NFL corners and NFL defensive backs are like, in my opinion, aside from the tight end, shout out George Kittle, are probably one of the most athletic positions on the field. Like, because you got to be able to shift on a dime. Your reflexes have to be amazing and all of that. And I think that honestly, if you look at the guys, I mean, Riley can cover him, but I don't know. I don't know if he's a product of the system and he just has excelled, or if he's like that dude. You can tell like the plays that Desmond King made, like he was that dude. He made a one-handed interception. Like I haven't seen Riley Moss do those things. I feel like Riley Moss is a solid contributor and he's a standout on this defense. But in the NFL, I couldn't tell you for sure if I thought that this guy's going to be somebody in the NFL. So I feel like he needs to take this now. And I'm sorry, Riley, for saying that. I'm just telling you what I see. What I will say, though, Tyler Linderbaum, I could see him coming back. He hasn't had any major injuries. I see he wears both knee braces on both knees, to protect himself. And he's just pancaking the shit out of everybody. So, like, when you're doing that, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I don't see him getting injured. I mean, I wonder I'd be curious to know what the stats are on centers and injuries, because it doesn't seem like a position that's very injury prone, because I feel like they get a step on everybody. They get to snap the ball.
Yep, for sure. And guys, I'm going to agree with you both on Linderbaum, but I'm going to disagree. And I think that Riley Moss is going to come back. Because white corners do not excel in the NFL. B, he has a similar trajectory as Jake Gervais. He's going to have to move to safety, likely. And I think he'll be a practice squad guy. And so that will convince him to stay back for another year, play college ball, because he knows he probably won't have a long NFL tenure. So that's my story there. So, Rob, I'm going to pass another question, our second last question here in our mailbag segment. There's a lot of talk about Spencer Petras already looking good this week. May get some playing time on Saturday. Who do you start? Do you start Padilla, or do you start Spencer Petras, or do you do a combination of both?
Okay. We're not starting. I don't care how great he looks. We're not starting Petras. And we're not going to do a combination of both. And here's why. Bo, I'll give you an old adage from Aesop's Fables, or something that my dad used to tell me because he was full of them. But you don't change horses midstream. You just don't. You're crossing the stream. You chose the one you're doing, and now you've made the choice, and you can't switch back. You know what I mean? And so I feel like once we made the decision, Kirk Ferentz made the decision to go with Padilla. Now it's Padilla. Now it's Padilla's turn to do with it what he will. But like we saw, like Kirk had Petras, according to me, like on a long leash. He could just sort of do whatever he wanted. He made some pretty great plays last year, but he hasn't really made that many great plays this year. And we let him do that for lots of games. And granted, we're winning these games, but I mean, I don't know. I don't think that we go back to him. I think that he's had his shot. I think now it's time for Padilla until he loses it. And so I don't think it would be wise. I think first off, we know Kirk Ferentz doesn't like to talk to the media and doesn't like to talk about quarterback controversies. Dill educated us on that last week. If you remember, we went into that segment. And so why would he invite another quarterback controversy media storm by switching back or doing a combination of both? So that's my take on it. What do you think?
Oh, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Rob. All that would do is cause a distraction. And we know how much Kirk and Brian hate distractions. It's not going to happen. The only way you're going to see Spencer Petras in this game, I do think he's going to be suited up and ready to go as an emergency backup. Because despite him not being on the depth chart, I do think he is the true backup to Alex Padilla now. Because, he is the team first guy. He is a leader. He knows how to run the offense like the back of his hand. So he will be that emergency backup. But this is Alex Padilla's show until it's not. So ride or die with him, I'd say. And that's got to be the way. I just don't see any other way to go about it. I think the decision's been made. Let's ride it out, and good things are happening. So keep rolling with it, and then keep Petras as an emergency backup and see what happens. That's my thoughts.
Agree with you both there. Well, guys, that's it on football. Great episode. Dill, we're going to pass to you before we end this thing off. And we're going to need a real quick wrestling update prior to this Friday's matchup against Princeton here in Iowa City at 7:00. For those of you guys who are going. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Oh, no. Keep going. I have a question after you're done.
Yeah. So 7:00, it's on Big Ten Plus. So for those of you who don't have Big Ten Plus, you're going to have to get a subscription. But 7:00 at Cover Hawkeye Arena. And Rob will pass to you for your question.
Yes. So, and when we cover wrestling, and if you're a new listener to Hawkeyes and Tallboys, we like to cover wrestling. We like to cover basketball in the off season, and we're coming up on that now. And so I'm actually very inexperienced when it comes to wrestling, and Hawkeye wrestling is sort of the first iteration aside from pro wrestling, like WWE, that I've been exposed to it. So I sort of serve a lot as our question person for maybe listeners who don't know. I'll ask the questions that are on your mind. One of the first ones that come to mind for me. So does the wrestling season, I know it starts in the fall. Is this our first match of the year?
Yes. First official duel of the year, Rob. They've already had one tournament in the Luther Open where they went to last week, or most of the guys went to it last week. And I think Iowa crowned 8 champions and had a few third placers as well. But basically where they go, get to wrestle some D3 guys and, get loose and get ready for a Big Ten wrestling season. And if you don't know, Big Ten is by far and away the toughest wrestling conference in the NCAA. So.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And then also I did hear, which is really interesting news on the wrestling front, is that we sold out of season tickets. And I think we looked this up after one of the episodes a few weeks ago, guys, but Carver Hawkeye Arena, I think only holds 13 some?
16,000, I think it is.
16,000. And I think we sold 14,500 season tickets, something like that.
Yep. So that's what you have, for those of you that don't know, Iowa won the national title in wrestling last year. Huge accomplishment as far as the rebuilding process that has came since Cale Sanderson took over at Penn State. That elusive national title. I think Iowa was kind of destined to get one in that 2019 season, only to get the national tournament only to get that national tournament cut out due to COVID. So finally got that title here in 2021, and pumped to see the guys back out on the mat, and the entire team's back. So I couldn't be more excited. And what's funny enough is, there's a lot of unfinished business because despite them winning a national championship, they only crowned one individual national champion in Spencer Lee. So a lot of guys coming back with a lot to prove. So it's going to be another fun one. I'm pumped.
And it's going to be packed. I think Bo just updated us in the chat here. 15,500 seats in Carver Hawkeye, 14,500 are filled.
Yeah.
So so that leaves maybe 1,000 for the other team, possibly, you know.
Right. A very, very small section for opposing teams to come through. And it's for those of you wrestling fans, and even if you're not a wrestling fan, I highly recommend you get out to a meet at Carver Hawkeye. It's, biasly the best place in the world to watch wrestling. I still, I'll tell my grandkids about a few years 2 years back watching that Penn State Iowa meet in Carver, Iowa beating Penn State for the first time in 10 years. And it was just incredible, one storied program in the Iowa Hawkeyes, from the Dan Gable days and whatnot. And then one up and coming program with Cale Sanderson, who many of you may not know. So the head coach for Penn State was a 4-time national champion, undefeated college wrestler at Iowa State University. So Cale's had a long rivalry with the Iowa Hawkeyes and has had a lot of success against them as well from his time both at Iowa State and at Penn State. So it's turned into a very, very fun rivalry and will continue to be for many years. And yeah, I'm sure you guys can tell I'm getting a little, I'm just pumped. I'm very, very excited. So it's going to be fun. And I think that brings us into, looking into this first non-conference matchup, Iowa's wrestling with Princeton. And I know a lot of you wrestling fans out there are probably looking forward to that Spencer Lee and Pat Glory matchup. And unfortunately, at least according to the probables, you're not going to see that one. Now, we know from Spencer's national championship speech that he's nursing, a couple torn ACLs and whatnot. So unfortunately, you're not going to get to see the 3-time national champion go, but instead we're going to get to see a young buck, out of Tucson, Arizona, Jesse Ibarra, red shirt freshman, I believe he is, an absolute stud, coming out of high school anyways, but he's got quite the test. He's going to have number 2, number 3 ranked Pat Glory. Again, that's going to be a big test for him. That's going to be a fun one. Just to see where Jesse's at. I don't think anybody's really expecting him to come in and beat the multiple-time All-American. That being said, it's the University of Iowa, and these wrestlers, a lot can happen. So looking forward to that matchup. And then we get to it, you're going to see Austin DeSanto or Cullen Shriver. For those of you Iowa folks might know, Cullen's twin brother comes out of Mason City. Both twins wrestle for the Hawkeyes now. Or I think one might have actually transferred. Maybe I might be thinking of the other twins because they got 2 sets of twins, but regardless, I'm sure somebody will correct me on Twitter afterwards. So you're going to see DeSanto or Cullen Shriver go. I think if Iowa, I'm predicting Iowa to go down in that 125 matchup with a Pat Glory major decision. So I think you're going to see Austin DeSanto come out there and tech. More than likely Nick Kyle, that sophomore from Princeton as well. So then from there we got, our returning national finalist and Jaden Ironman, super senior, if you will, taking advantage of his COVID year. And he's going to be wrestling against Jacob Mann or Josh Breeding. I'm looking at a pin there. I think Iowa gets the pin there. So team score wise, you're looking at 11-4, 11-3. Let's go 11-4 just to play it safe. And then from there, bumping up to 149, you're going to have Bretley Reyna or Kobe Seabrecht. So those of you true, longtime Iowa wrestling fans might notice there's a big name missing there at that 149 spot in Max Mirren. Now, we don't know. Again, I think that's more of just a rest thing because Iowa's going to be able to handle Princeton. So we'll see what happens there. But that being said, it's a multiple man race because you got Vince Turk that, transferred back to Iowa after wrestling for Iowa for a few years as well. So anybody's ball game there at 49, and I'll be curious to see who steps foot out on the mat. So Bretley Reyna, Kobe Seabrecht from Lisbon, Iowa here just up the road, or Vince Turk. So that'll be a fun one. Then you got multiple-time All-American as well, Caleb Young, currently ranked number 6. And that's going to be a fun matchup there because he's set to go up against Quincy Monday. So they've had a few matchups in the past, usually some pretty tight, pretty close wrestling, 2-1, 3-1 type matches. So that'll be a good matchup. I'm going to give the edge to Caleb Young because it is at Carver. And for those of you that don't know, again, I talked about it before, but Carver, it's just such an insane place to wrestle these guys. it's a whole new atmosphere that the guys aren't necessarily used to. So I think you're going to see a big time match out of Caleb Young, and he's going to come away with the victory there. So, looking again, so 149. So what's that score? I was just at 11, right? So that's looking about 17-3 Iowa, give or take. Coming into Alex Marinelli at 165 and 165 again. I don't think it's going to be close. I think Marinelli's pissed off last year. Didn't have a great showing at the NCAA championships like he would have liked to have. So I see him winning big here. I'm going major decision there. So that's 21-3 Iowa, 174 TBD. So I'm sure a lot of you people don't know who TBD is, but it's not any special wrestler. It's just to be determined. They don't know if Michael Kemmerer is going to go. Talk about, Patrick Kennedy's going 165 this year and giving Marinelli the record a hell of a run at the Luther Open there. I think they matched up in the finals, and Patrick Kennedy about got the best of Marinelli there. So I think he's giving him all he can handle as a backup, which is cool to say. He's given this multi-time Big Ten champion, multi-time All-American, all you can handle, and we get a lot more years of Patrick Kennedy. So a product, I want to say, of Minnesota, if I remember right. But regardless, absolute stud on the mat. So pumped to see that matchup and see what they trot out. Abe Assad as well. So you got Abe Assad, returning All-American, going up against Forrest Bell or possibly Travis Stefanik. So again, I'm going to give the edge to Abe Assad here. I think, he's just going to have too much, and he's going to be coming off actually a loss in the championship of the Luther Open to a kid in high school from Wisconsin. So now, again, this guy's a Mizzou commit. He's an absolute stud of a wrestler. Don't get me wrong, wrestling unattached with the Mizzou program. He's going to be one to keep an eye out for. But that being said, I think Abe Assad's got a little something to prove after losing that matchup. So, and then going from there, we got, another All-American. I mean, you get what I'm getting at here, guys. Iowa's got a lot of All-Americans returning here. I think pretty much everybody was an All-American with the exception of 149. So, but yeah, you got either Jacob Warner or Zach Glazier coming in. Both can get the job done. Looking at, and it's going to be Lucas Stout, true freshman out of Men Lebanon, Pennsylvania for Princeton. So that'll be a good one. And then the man, the myth, the legend himself, big, no longer that big, Tony Cassiope. So I don't know if you guys have seen the picture and the work that Tony Cass has been putting in the offseason, but he was recently a U23 or U22, I forget, U23 world champion. So that's not national champion, that's world champion in freestyle. This kid has put in the work. I don't think he's got an ounce of baby fat on him anymore, where, before he was a bit of a bowling ball and got rocked by the likes of Mason Paris from Michigan and then, Olympic champ Gable Stevenson out of Minnesota. So he's there to compete, guys. They got him ranked at number 3. I think he can possibly take out Paris this year just based off looks and the way he wrestled in those U23s. I don't know that it's going to be enough for Gable. I'm not going to do anything crazy there, but anything can happen. So all I'll say is Cassiope's ready to rock, and I see this one ending in a pin, assuming they start at 125, and Carver's going to be rocking and ready for a hell of a year. So overall, let me add up those points quick, because I think Princeton gets the first one, and then I don't think they score again. So we're looking at 3, so 3-5, 5 11-3, 11-3, 14-3, 14-3, 17-3, 21-3, 24-3, 27-3. So 33-3. A lot of threes. But that's what I got as the final score of this one. So write that down, kids. The Iowa Hawkeye, the national champions, are back, and they're looking to defend their crown. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
Nice. Perfect. Well, thank you, Dill, for that update.
And because I spent so much time on wrestling, I got to get a quick plug here to basketball. Keegan Murray is playing absolutely out of his mind, and he is going to break every scoring record that college basketball has to offer. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Wow. Bold.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. He's really improved a lot over the last year. I actually went to the home opener against Longwood, and watched
Nice.
Keegan Murray have, over 20 points in the first half. So,
Dude's player.
but
good.
yeah, he's. What's surprising is that, and I hate to say this, but how great he is, and compared to how Chris still has a lot of development that needs to go on before. And I just think maybe it might be a playing time thing. But I mean, you're talking about a guy with the exact same body as you. You're identical twins.
Right.
And I mean, obviously, everyone's their own individual person, but I think you give him some playing time. We can get him up to the same levels where Keegan's at right now, have two guys in there who can go off for 20 or more. He had 21 or 24 rebounds the last game, Keegan Murray.
And didn't play the whole game. Let's point that out too. So
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So perfect, guys. Well, we can go ahead and close it out like we always do. Thanks for tuning in. Obviously, this is a little bit of a longer episode, but we wanted to give you updates on not only just where the football team's at and what we have going on this weekend, but obviously we got wrestling starting up, and Dill is our guide there. And then obviously, basketball starting up at the same time. So it's a busy time for us, but thanks for tuning in and listening. And we'll close it out as always, guys, with a little Hawkeye victory polka.
right,
And
let's go Hawks. Woo!
perfect. And give me just 1 second so I can share that sound. Thank you for listening.